This isn't just another missing person story. This is one of the most unsettling unsolved disappearances to ever come out of Massachusetts and Maine. And that's not just True Crimes by Dominic talking. That's coming straight from seasoned detectives who've combed through this case for decades without closure. It was a late summer evening in 1988 when 69-year-old Virginia Douglas, a mother, wife, and caretaker, walked into the Rennie's department store in Belfast, Maine, just to use the restroom. She never walked back out. No witnesses, no camera footage, no sign of distress, just silence, and a void where Virginia once stood. To this day, the same questions still haunt those who remember her. Did she vanish by choice? Was she taken? Or disturbingly, was she ever really there at all? Hey, I'm Dominic, and welcome to another chilling episode of True Crimes by Dominic. If you're into real-life mysteries that refuse to be solved, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, tap the like, and share this video with someone who loves a good mystery. And while you're here, drop a comment. Do you think Virginia planned her own disappearance, or is something far darker at play? Now let's rewind and head to Maine to piece together the strange and heartbreaking case of Virginia Douglas, the woman who quite literally vanished into thin air. Virginia and her husband Frank had built a quiet, comfortable life in Lexington, Massachusetts, a pleasant suburban town just outside of Boston. They married young, after bonding over their shared job at the bank, and eventually raised 3 children, 2 daughters, Marilyn and Virginia, or Ginny, as she was often called, and a son, Frank Jr. Frank retired in '83 and jumped headfirst into hobbies: skiing, tennis, chess, and a buzzing social life. Meanwhile, Virginia had long ago left the bank to raise their children and eventually took on the gentle work of caring for the elderly. She was calm, generous, and deeply nurturing, the kind of person who didn't need the spotlight. But while Frank's post-retirement life bloomed with activity, Virginia's world seemed to shrink. He was rarely home, always out doing something, and she, mostly left behind. Friends said their marriage seemed normal, but when you look at what's coming, that detail starts to feel a lot less ordinary. So on the evening of September 1st, 1988, after 46 years of marriage, Virginia and Frank did something spontaneous, something they'd never done before: a last-minute road trip to Bar Harbor, Maine. Maybe Virginia wanted to shake things up. Maybe she wanted to be seen again, to remind her husband that she still had a spark. They were headed to the scenic trails of Acadia National Park for the holiday weekend. Just the two of them, a getaway to reconnect. At about 8:30 p.m., they got into their dark blue 1987 Oldsmobile Cutlass and hit the open road. It was going to be a memorable trip, though in the end, it was for all the wrong reasons. Now, Bar Harbor for them was a 5-hour drive if you're really cruising. Add in stops and whatnot, and you're looking at closer to 6. So they got a late start, but they weren't in any rush. After all, the journey is part of the adventure. And so that night, they stopped on in at the South Portland Motor Inn, where they laid their weary heads before continuing their journey after breakfast the next morning. They must have really been in no rush, because at 5:30 p.m. on Friday, September 2nd, well, Frank pulled into the parking lot of Rennie's department store in Belfast, Maine. That's about 2 hours north of the motel, so they hadn't gone too far. As it were, Virginia needed to use the restroom there. And so Frank did as a good husband does, dropped her off at the door, parked the car, and waited outside. And Frank waited patiently. But as 10 and then 15 minutes passed, he began to grow worried. Maybe the restroom line was long, he thought. Maybe she decided to browse the store. He was making up justifications in his mind. But then he decided to go in and check for himself, because maybe there was a medical emergency. He scribbled a quick note and left it on the steering wheel, just in case she returned while he was gone. He went inside and checked the bathroom, but she wasn't there. He scoped out the aisles, trying to catch a glimpse, but still couldn't find her. Frank headed back to the car to wait again. Virginia's handbag was still on the seat, containing her money, credit cards, and crucial eye medication, which she needed to use 4 times a day, and she wouldn't have gone too far. And that's when his thoughts started steering in a darker direction. What if somebody did something to her? Another 10 minutes ticked by, and this time, Frank went back inside with purpose. He walked every single aisle, scanning the shelves and corners, hoping to spot his wife. Nothing. Growing desperate, he stopped other shoppers, asking if they had seen her. Nobody had. They flagged down employees and urged them to make an announcement over the store's speaker system. Still nothing. And by 6:45 p.m., with still no sign of Virginia, well, Frank picked up the phone and called the police. The Belfast PD quickly launched an extensive search of Rennie's in the surrounding areas. They interviewed store employees, some of whom recalled seeing a woman matching Virginia's description that evening, but none could confirm with certainty that it was her. One witness reported seeing a woman resembling Virginia walking west on Route 3, but inconsistencies in the reported times and circumstances led investigators to believe the sightings were unreliable. So the first sort of wrinkle in the whole case, other than the fact that a woman had disappeared, of course, was that in the end, not one single witness could place Virginia inside that store or anywhere else after she supposedly entered. For 3 days, search teams scoured the area, and Frank, who was desperate, even went as far as hiring his own search dogs to comb through the wooded areas behind the store. He also left his car parked in the exact spot where Virginia had last seen it, with someone stationed there at all times in case she returned. Police distributed Virginia's photo, urging the public to come forward with any information, and Frank called hospitals, shelters, and family members, hoping for a lead. But still, nothing surfaced. At one point, a psychic reportedly contacted one of the Douglases' neighbors, claiming that Virginia was still inside the store. Frank, determined to follow every possibility, convinced the store manager to open Rennie's on Labor Day, despite it being closed for the holiday. And alongside the manager and 2 other employees, he searched every inch of that building, moving boxes, checking storage rooms, even inspecting the roof. But that search, like all the others, turned up empty, and Virginia Douglas had either vanished into thin air, or there was more to the story than Frank was letting on. With no concrete clues as to Virginia's whereabouts, police began retracing the couple's movements from the moment they left their home on that Thursday evening. The first known stop they made was the South Portland Motor Inn, so that's where they headed. It was here that Frank claimed they had stayed the night and had breakfast downstairs in the morning, and this was the start of a troubling pattern that seemed to be popping up, because much like nobody having seen Virginia inside the Rennie store, well, none of the staff members at the motel remembered ever seeing Virginia either. A hotel desk clerk confirmed that Frank had, in fact, checked in sometime after 11 p.m. on September 1st, but could not recall seeing Virginia with him at any point, neither when he arrived nor when he left the next morning. This then raised a new and important question. What prompted this unique, impromptu trip? Well, Frank's explanation, and what he told police, was that the night before they left, he and Virginia had an argument after he accidentally locked her out of the house. He said he had been watering the lawn and went inside to use the bathroom, unintentionally locking the screen door behind him. And within seconds, Virginia was at the door, visibly upset. Frank claimed he assured her it was an accident, but she accused him of doing it deliberately. According to Frank, this kind of reaction was typical for Virginia. He described her as having mood swings and episodes of depression, sometimes shifting from cheerful to agitated in an instant. However, he insisted that they quickly made amends, and the spontaneous trip to Maine was meant as a peace offering. Frank also told investigators that this was not the first time Virginia had disappeared. He recalled an incident 25 years earlier when she allegedly left home after a family dispute and traveled to New York for a few days before returning. However, he insisted that this time was different. Virginia had left behind her purse, credit cards, and most notably, those eye drops that she needed 4 times a day, and she wouldn't have run away on her own without those things. As Frank explained in asking around about who the Douglases were as a couple to really try to get to know them, detectives found that those who knew them had varying perspectives on the couple's relationship. One close neighbor described it as normal, sometimes affectionate, sometimes argumentative, but nothing out of the ordinary for a marriage of nearly 50 years. However, their own daughter, Marilyn, painted a bit of a different picture. She claimed that her father didn't respect her mom and failed to acknowledge the strong, intelligent, and warm woman she was. So a bit darker than what you might call normal. And going back to their lives, sort of taking on different paths, some of the couple's friends had also noticed a shift in their dynamic after Frank's retirement. While he had become more active and social, Virginia had grown more isolated. The friends recalled instances where she expressed loneliness, telling them that Frank no longer spent time with her. He was always off playing tennis while she stayed at home, cooking his dinners and watching him leave. She was noticeably upset by this whole situation. Despite the growing suspicions toward Frank, not telling them everything there was to know, there was still no physical evidence to indicate what had really happened to Virginia Douglas. And so, the search continued. State police conducted a thorough search of the Douglas family's vehicle, recovering several items, including a piece of carpet from the trunk lining, along with traces of mud and grass. However, no blood was found inside the car. Then, as investigators spoke with employees at the Rennie's department store, they uncovered something peculiar that Frank had failed to mention. A store clerk recalled that shortly after reporting his wife's disappearance, Frank purchased women's lingerie. He even asked the female clerk for her size, because she looked about the same as his wife, so that he could get the right fit for Virginia. What struck investigators as even stranger was that, within the hour, Frank returned to the store to buy more lingerie. And all this was happening while he continued his search for his missing wife. When police later examined Virginia's suitcase, which was allegedly packed for their weekend getaway, they found that all the brand new lingerie was inside, yet there was no other underwear in the suitcase. So did Virginia forget to pack her own? Or had Frank actually packed that suitcase and, realizing the police would look inside it, purchased those undergarments to try and make it appear like he hadn't messed that part up? When questioned about his purchases, Frank explained that he bought the lingerie as a good omen, quote unquote, hoping that by offering Virginia a gift, she would return to him. But the fact that he kept this information from the police until they discovered it on their own only deepened the suspicion surrounding his actions. And daughter Jenny spent several days in Belfast assisting in the search for her mom before returning to the Lexington, Massachusetts, home she shared with her parents. With her mother being missing at the top of her mind, well, suddenly something stood out that concerned her. Virginia had always been meticulous about taking care of and securing the house, and this was what she saw as her responsibility as a good wife and mother. Yet when Jenny arrived, the windows were open, the shades were up, and the refrigerator was fully stocked with food, as though somebody had left in a hurry. Spontaneous is one thing, but the mother she knew would have drawn the blinds and locked up at the very least. Certainly taken some of the food, as it would have gone bad while they were gone. She was not one to waste things. And Jenny also found it odd that her mother and father had left so late the night before, especially since she was due to return home from work just an hour later. It was uncharacteristic of Virginia not to wait for her daughter to at least say goodbye. A close friend of Virginia shared the same sentiment, explaining that Virginia always made an effort to be home when Jenny arrived, knowing the exact time she would be returning. At first, Jenny didn't pay much attention to the strange condition of the house. However, after returning from work the following week, Jenny then made a discovery so shocking that she immediately contacted the police. Authorities later revealed that bloodstains were found on the carpet, matching Virginia's blood type, and clumps of her hair were discovered near the back door, on the ground, in the creases of the doorframe. You know, the type of thing you'd see, perhaps, if someone were dragged out of the house. So was there just an argument by that screen door? Or did it go much further than that? Was Frank perhaps tired of his wife being a burden on his active lifestyle? Maybe there was a fight about just that. And with it, Frank snapped. Really, the possibilities of what happened are kind of endless and all just speculation. But I'll let you be the judge. In the end, though, Virginia did live in that house, so her blood and even her hair sort of belonged there, at least as far as evidence is concerned. Virginia's disappearance had the family divided, and Marilyn and Jenny found the circumstances beyond strange. But Frank Jr. had other ideas. He took his father's side. The girls, however, did not. They said that their father hadn't even contacted them to let them know their mother was missing. They instead had to find out from the police. Marilyn and her father had also been estranged for years before Virginia's disappearance, for reasons that she has never disclosed. And this was just the icing on that cake. After discovering the blood and hair, Jenny moved out and cut ties with her father. Later that year, she returned to collect her skis, but discovered that the locks had been changed. This only fueled her suspicions further. Despite extensive searches, the investigation had nothing concrete, just a bunch of strange stories and circumstantial evidence. Without a body, it was hard to prove what exactly happened to Virginia. Around 6 weeks after her vanishing, Frank did a disappearing act of his own. They returned to his home en masse, but stopped giving interviews to the media, essentially giving up on looking for her. Just 3 months after her disappearance, Virginia's daughters revealed to the media that they suspected she was dead and threw her memorial service in Florida in hopes of starting the healing process. Their father, Frank, and their brother did not attend that service. Not only do Virginia's daughters believe she was murdered, but they say they know who killed her. However, due to legal reasons, they're unable to name the person they suspected. They did, however, share their suspicions with police, and Frank quickly returned to his normal life. He was back on those tennis courts. He did yard work and even chatted with neighbors as they strolled by. And one of them commented that he was always bringing Virginia up as if he was looking for people to talk to about her. An entire year had passed when Frank hired a criminal defense lawyer, saying he did so in case he became a suspect. Not long after, in September of '89, just over a year after Virginia's disappearance, the police uncovered new information that led to a search near Sebago Lake, about 2.5 hours from Belfast and an hour and a half from Portland. That search involved police dogs, state officers, and the FBI, but the specific information that prompted the search was never disclosed. Sebago Lake, the second largest lake in Maine, spans several towns, with Casco being particularly notable as it is home to Frank's brother. And Frank's children had called their uncle earlier to see if he had any information about Virginia, as he was the only family they knew in Maine. But they got nothing from him. Despite the extensive search, no evidence or clues were found near that lake, and there was no indication that Virginia's body, or any sign of her, had ever even been there. And this case remains officially classified as a missing person investigation, with no concrete evidence to confirm foul play. And 3 years after Virginia's disappearance, in 1991, police did officially name Frank as a suspect in the case. At this point, Virginia's daughters Marilyn and Jenny stopped holding back, and they publicly shared what they had long believed, that their mother's death was not planned, but was the result of an accident. One of them stated that, in her opinion, when their dad realized what he had done, he panicked, disposed of Virginia's body, and then fabricated an implausible story that no one, neither family, friends, nor strangers, ever believed. And despite Marilyn and Jenny's firm belief that justice would one day prevail, years continued to pass with no arrests or significant developments in the case. A decade after Virginia's disappearance, a detective described the case as one of the most unusual he had ever encountered. The investigation may have continued, but without a single breakthrough, the mystery of what truly happened to Virginia Douglas still haunts the shadows. Frank Douglas eventually passed away, carrying any damning truths he might have known to his grave. After her disappearance, he reportedly spent years alone in their home, isolated, silent, and surrounded by whispers that refused to fade. But here's the unsettling part. Was Virginia ever really at that motel or that breakfast? Did she vanish at the Renai's department store? Or was that just a carefully placed distraction? Could it be that her fate was sealed long before that Labor Day weekend ever began? You see, sometimes the scariest monsters don't come from the woods or wear masks. They sit across from you at breakfast. What do you think happened to Virginia Douglas? Was this a crime of passion, a calculated cover-up, or something far more sinister? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Seriously, your perspective might just shine a light on a detail others missed. Plus, it's one of the best ways you can support True Crimes by Dominic. If this case gave you chills, imagine what's coming next. We dive into stories like this every 2 days, unsettling, disturbing, and all too real. So if you're into dark truths and haunting mysteries, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who loves a good true crime mystery. Because who knows, maybe a true crime story from your town will be next.